So welcome to today's panel discussion, which is all about predictions and trends for 2024 in the world of PR and communications. If you've only just joined, I'm Dominic Ridley-Moy and I run the Behaviour Change Network, which is all about bringing behaviour change to life for communications professionals. And I also co-chair CIPR's local public services group. But today's all about the year ahead, the challenges, the threats and the opportunities. We live in an ever-changing world and our jobs are arguably more difficult than they've ever been before. So many of us are dealing with the impact of the cost of living crisis, global conflicts, the ongoing impact of Brexit, the post-pandemic world, climate change, upcoming elections and much more. And all of these challenges are equally important regardless of whether you work in external or internal communications. And as communications professionals, we're living in a post-truth era with a rising tide of disinformation along with an uncertain future thanks to the explosion of AI, which is something I'm sure we'll cover extensively today. But it's not all doom and gloom. As an industry, I certainly see some of the most creative people I know do sterling work week in, week out, which is something we should all celebrate and be proud of. So today is all about how we can equip you for the year ahead. What are the trends we all need to be aware of? How can we continue to add real value that benefits where we work and to our clients? And what should we be doing as comms professionals to equip ourselves for an ever-changing world? So these are all questions that we will cover today over the next hour. So I'm hugely excited to hear what our panel are going to say. As I said earlier, please do ask questions in the chat and we'll try and cover off as many as we can. Before we start, just a few bits of housekeeping. So I'm sure everyone knows the usual Zoom etiquette, Teams etiquette even. So yeah, please keep your sound off. We've advertised today for 45 minutes, but we're going to keep going for now, mainly because we've got such a great panel and there's so many questions I'd like to ask all of them. And I know that you are going to have lots of questions as well. So do drop them in the chat as we go along. If you're a CIPR member, a recording from today will be available to log CPD points, so do take advantage of that and do have a chat. I'm always happy to chat about why you should join CIPR if you're not a member. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves and to say a bit about their focus of their work for the year ahead. So Advita, would you like to kick off, please?
Yeah, sure. And Dan's here, by the way.
Ah, excellent.
So just to let you know. Hi, everyone. Okay. My name is Advita Patel, and I own an internal communications and employee experience consultancy called Comms Rebel. You can just about see my little neon sign behind me. I'm also the co-founder of A Leader Like Me, which is a global consultancy focusing on building inclusive cultures. And I'm also the co-founder of Calm Edge Rebels, which is a coaching retreat, that I host with two of my good friends, Jenny Field and Trudy Lewis. My focus for the next year is definitely working with organisations to help them understand how they can continue to build a culture where colleagues can be the best they possibly can be and thrive in the work that they're doing through effective communication. I feel in the last few years there has been a lot of focus on equity, diversity and inclusion. The light is dimming a little bit, I would say, with other focus that's taking place over it, but the appetite in organisations is still there to help colleagues do the best they possibly can do, but making sure that they have equity in doing that. So my focus is going to be helping organisations do that better and understand what they can do to improve working life for the colleagues through, as I said, effective communication.
Excellent. Thank you, Advita. And we'll cover off a lot of the topics you just talked about during the next hour. Stephen, did you want to introduce yourself next, please? You're on mute, Stephen.
There you go. Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Stephen Waddington. I'm a management consultant with 25 years in the industry, working with agencies and communications teams. We focus on supporting training, change, performance and measurement. I'm also a founder of a community interest group called Socially Mobile that provides management trainings for people from diverse backgrounds, aiming to level up our profession. Finally, I'm a PhD student, and you might have spotted I've come in on my student account, where at Leeds Business School, where I'm now in my third year exploring the relationship between public relations and management and what the optimum performance looks like. Along the way, I've done a lot of teaching as professor at Newcastle University for 10 years and written a number of books. If you study public relations, you've almost certainly used public relations and management communication. Most recently published one about AI at the start of last year. My particular area of interest relates to my PhD and focused on the alignment of public relations and management, and hoping I can talk about that at some point today. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. You're very welcome, and yes, we'll certainly cover lots of that today. And last but by no means least, so hopefully Dan has been able to join us, and the technology is working. So over to Dan, just to say
hello.
Hi Dan, how are you? Everything working? Excellent.
All right, yes, yeah. Hello, my name's Dan. I'm not that great at using technology. And I suppose in a nutshell, the last 10 years, I've been freelance, where I've worked with, in one degree or another, 1,056 organisations, and 80% of them are in the public sector. And broadly speaking, it's just to help organisations communicate better with a lot of digital and social media part of that. So that's me in a nutshell. Sorry for being late.
That's all right. I'm pleased to have you here, and we'll be covering lots of your predictions for 2024. So without further ado, we're going to go into your predictions and trends for 2024. So if you want to run through what your top 3 predictions and or trends are for the year ahead in the world of comms and PR. So I'm going to start off with Advita first.
Oh, thank you. So my number 1 prediction, and I'm going to go from the sense of internal comms and employee experience, is better personalization. I think with the focus on sophisticated AI, which I know Dan and Stephen probably cover in their predictions, people are now expecting things to be a bit more personalized. And it's a drum I've been banging since I've been in internal comms for the last 20 years, that the external kind of market do quite well with personalizing emails and messaging in terms of consumers, but we're not the best when it comes to internal comms. But I do believe with the technology that's available now and the focus that in terms of cutting through all the noise, better personalization it's on its way for 2024. My second prediction is we went through a bit of a turbulent time when it comes to comms in terms of our presence as a strategic function in an organisation. I think when the pandemic hit, the comms function was seen as quite an important resource. We then went through a bit of a turbulence where we were kind of cut out again. But I do think 2024 again is back. I was watching the World Economic Forum press conference yesterday, where they're talking about their 19th edition of the global risks across the world, and there were some really important things for us to be aware of as communication professionals, but also for us to be able to guide and advise our leaders effectively to ensure that they are set up for success, to make sure that they're directing the organisation in the right way. The number 1 prediction, and we just spoke about it before everyone joined, was about misinformation and disinformation, which is going to be catastrophic if we don't get a handle on it. And 2024 is a year of elections. Almost 3 billion people across the globe are going to be taking part in elections, from India to the US and other countries, which means that misinformation, disinformation is likely to be rife at that time. As communication professionals, what role do we play to ensure that our leaders are educating and supporting the truth and the facts in the organisation, and we're supporting and guiding our colleagues to be aware of what is misinformation and what is disinformation and what impact does that have. So I do think we're going to be taken more seriously than we ever have been. I think the importance on our role will be there. I think we need to lead by example, and we need to make sure that our leaders understand the value that we're bringing. And my third and final prediction is around human storytelling. I think with everything that's going on with AI and the technology that we have available, which I am definitely in agreement with to an extent, I think the lots of AI experts do say that it's not AI that'll take our roles, it's people who know how to use AI that are likely to take our roles. But we have a significant role to play in terms of humanizing some of these stories that our colleagues and leaders are telling us to make it more accessible in one area and inclusive, and being aware of the biases that AI may bring on board. And I think we have a significant role to play as communication professionals. And I think 2024 will be the year where human storytelling comes up again. My 3 predictions.
Thank you, Advita. I was about to ask I was thinking with personalisation, is human storytelling going to be the answer to that? But you've already answered that, I think, to an extent. And just about the global risks report that Advita talks about, I've just put the link in the chat. Stephen, would you like to share your predictions next, please?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dom. Thanks, Advita. Great to see you, Dan. So first of all, the economy. Before this session, so I'm up in Newcastle, near the coast, near Whitley Bay. I went over to our local high street and to get a sandwich, and just looking around, and it's pretty bloody despondent, to be fair. So there's a couple of people living homeless. There's a couple of charity shops. There's a tanning salon. There's a bakery where I got my lunch, a card factory, and that same set of shops has been there for 5, maybe 6 years, and it really talks to the malaise, the economic malaise in the UK, and it's supported by the numbers. I mean, inflation. Yeah, the government's committed to halving inflation, but the November numbers from the ONS were 5.2%. GDP from the Office of Budget Responsibility was 0.6% for 2023. It's 0.7% for 2024. These numbers are brutal. I mean, in real terms, we're seeing a 4% contraction in the economy last year. We're going to see the same this year. And there's no economic stimulus coming from the government. In fact, I think our political class at the moment is completely out of touch. We've got a prime minister who has a passive income of £50 million a year. 30 million pounds a year, assets of 500 million pounds a year. And, we're just, the country is out of ideas. We desperately need an election. I think, we're running on fumes, and we have to get that election sooner rather than later. Now, as far as I could tell, the Conservative government's going to hold out for as long as possible. And I could see it leaving the election until January 2025 now, with the last possible moment when it could be run. Let's hope that's not the case. What does that mean for us? It means we've got to do more with less. It means almost certainly we'll see some more councils go bust. Unfortunately, we'll see public and private sector organisations go out of business. So on the economy, it's brutal. Communicators are going to have to do more with less. It's first thing, sorry, but brutal reality. Second thing, we're seeing a backlash in comms, and Advita touched on this, around purpose and diversity. So ESG plainly isn't working. We're seeing beautiful reports come out of enterprise organisations in the public sector and private sector, yet our oceans are filthy. The temperature of the globe is out of control. We talk about the report that came out of the World Economic Forum yesterday. 1.5 is out of reach now. Almost certainly we're looking at 2.5 degrees of warming. It's catastrophic. And as we look around, employment conditions are poor. Longest junior doctor strike last week. Meanwhile, we see water companies such as my own. I'm up in Newcastle, I already said Northumbria Water has a really glossy, absolutely beautiful ESG report, but it also pollutes the coast around the northeast. We see Philip Morris rated as an ESG stock. Tell me how that works, because it's a tobacco and vaping company, albeit it's making moves to decarbonize, but it just doesn't make sense. and so I think in 2024 we're going to see a backlash from both a communication point of view and the perspective of measurement and asset management around ESG variables. Ultimately, we need some sort of standard, and that isn't emerging. We're also seeing a backlash within inside organisations. I think there's a lot of soft research done post-COVID related to the human experience within organisations, the expectation within organisations that they would take a stance on social and political issues, and that's completely been brought up short by geopolitical events, the war in Ukraine initially, and then what's happened with the situation in Palestine and Israel. And unless an organisation is directly involved and has people based in Gaza, it's a place you just do not want to go from an organisational perspective in terms of having a public opinion. So a whole range of issues around purpose and diversity, but as far as I'm concerned, ESG is completely broken. Third thing, and this encompasses both, and this isn't something we're going to solve this year. This is the story of my career and the rest of my career. It's something that's raised every single time that the CIPR does its census and the PRCA does its, CIPR does its state of the profession, the CIPR does its census, and this is the alignment of public relations and the management perspective. Advita is completely right. We saw comms elevated within management during the COVID crisis because of the public health emergency, because of the change within organisations that was required to manage changes to the supply chain, changes to the stakeholder and the whole working from home situation. That was, as we now know, predictable because of the emergency and crisis response situation. It's reverted now as budgets have tightened, but we also have a significant contribution to make ourselves. And I've 3 years in now to a PhD at Lisbon Business School, looking at why public relations hasn't got proper representation at a strategic management level. Only 20% of organisations do. And the reason comes down to two aspects. It's professionalism, so we don't hold ourselves accountable to the same standards of other management. So think about law, think about finance. We're just not qualified. We don't have professional standards that are universal across the industry, and we don't hold ourselves accountable to learning and development. PR Academy published a report last year that showed that of a population of 100,000 within the public relations community in the UK, around 15 to 20,000 they estimate have some form of professional qualification within public relations. We're just not serious. And then 100,000 of those are members of an organisation like the CIPR that are signed up to a code of ethics. It's less than 10% of the totality of the profession. We just need to do better. And the second issue that relates to that is holding ourselves accountable. So aligning the metrics that we measure our own performance by to those of the organisation. And typically there's a complete misalignment alignment there when we use proxies as value. I think if we can make steps to sort that out on both dimensions, so individually taking accountability for our own professional development, and if we can take steps towards aligning our measurement with the measurement of an organisation rather than proxies, we'll do well to not see budgets retract, do more or less, but increase. I mean, the story I always tell is within professional services, public relations is a professional service. It should attract the best people, like the other professions, like finance, like HR, like legal. We should be paid the same amounts because we're doing a professional function within management. We're just not. That, I believe, is the opportunity for us. So yeah, three things: the economy is shit, purpose and diversity, there's a backlash, and the management role, we need to do better.
Okay, there are some positives as well, and we're going to come back to, I think, the question of what we can all do as communications professionals to add value. So we'll come back to that in a second. And yeah, just noting a point from Louise in the chat that that lots of authorities are kind of facing backlash. There's a whole sort of, as we know, there's a whole media debate around poor financial management, which obviously a lot of the time is not the case when councils are declaring bankruptcy, but that's unfortunately where it's going. So that's something clearly to tackle. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over.
Interested. Sorry, just to be really interested to get Dan's perspective on that, because obviously that's the market in which he operates.
Yeah, and I was going to say, but just before you do, Dan, I was going to say Dan's predictions. So I think in 2023, his predictions for the year, he got 81% of them right. So Dan is definitely a person to listen to on the year ahead. Dan, do you want to share your predictions, please?
Golly, yeah. It's tricky though, because I sat down with that list of predictions I blogged over Christmas, and I had 26 of them. And I kind of like sat there with a cup of tea in my hand. I was thinking, well, which ones are more important? And it's like the stuff around tools, the stuff around tactics, strategy, elections, as Steve and Advita have mentioned, really important. And I think the points that Stephen and Advita have both mentioned are eminently valuable. But thinking about it with my cup of tea in hand, I was trying to think of three which were fairly universal. And the three which I thought probably apply to everybody who works in the sector is kind of a trend, but it's also a bit of a behaviour. If you can do more of this, 2024 will be a better place. And the first one I thought of, which is in the list of predictions, number one, educate the client repeatedly, daily, weekly, over and over again. The client could be your team, the colleagues you work with. It could be the leader of the council. It could be the chief executive. It could be like a really important person from an organisation. Educating the client, for me, is the number one thing to be doing in 2024 with all of those different things. Understanding it yourself, but telling people. Number two, I thought, with my cup of tea, really was just a broad recognition that the world is changing rapidly, not changed, because that means as though it's, you know, that process is finished. We can now have a good sit down and look at it, changing constantly, evolving in everything that we do. And the third point, the third thing, third trend, the third, if you do this, if you manage to do this in 2024, by the end of it, you'll go, God, it wasn't so bad actually, was it? It's a phrase that's really stuck in my mind from a book called The Coming Wave, which is written about AI and how it's changing. And there was just an anecdote in there where they had someone who was a medic explaining about how a terrorist organisation could conceivably get a germ or something, spread a disease, cost $30,000. And this medic came out of the room and said, everyone just blanked over. I don't understand this. You know, was it the data? Was it something else? And the conclusion was there's something which he described as pessimism aversion. And pessimism aversion is, do you know what? That's just so big. I'm just not even going to bother looking at it because it's just so bad and so depressing. Not today. I'll come back tomorrow. And we all do it, I think. You know, to some extent during the pandemic, you know, we kind of went from, you know, watching every news bulletin to, do you know what? I'm just stepping away from news for a bit now. Thanks. I've had too much. So, third one, pessimism aversion, kind of recognizing that in yourself, but also realizing in the audience when you say the world is changing, then there'll be a fair number of people just going, do you know what? This is just too much for me. Too much. I hate the idea of AI. I hate the idea of links not being in stuff. Just no, I'm not going to bother. So I think three things that trends, and also if you manage to kind of be aware of those things, you can navigate through 2024 with a degree of certainty about out of all of those. educate the client, because things are changing, rapidly. And if we're struggling to keep pace with that, what's the person who you're working with who doesn't do this for a living? What are they thinking? Well, they're thinking it's still 2012, where Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that's your answer, or posters. Could you go off and do that? I'm happy with that because that worked last year, didn't it? They're just changing. Educate the client. Big letters. That's it, Dominic.
Thank you, Dan. I think we're going to keep with that theme. So around the world is changing, and I think really thinking about how this impacts on communications teams, and also a point that everyone has made, and I'm going to come back to Advita and the point you made about, I think, comms being cut out and comms being back. So I think really the question is, as kind of comms professionals and comms teams in this ever-changing world, what is it that we can be doing? What should we be doing to navigate this ever-changing world? And I suppose really kind of, as I think Stephen said, we're doing more for less. So how do we continue adding value as comms teams and don't become irrelevant?
Great question there, Dom, and I completely agree and resonate with what Dan just shared around education and being fully aware of what's important for your organisation and for your customers and clients and consumers, because I think sometimes I can understand why quite a few folks have pessimism aversion, because it can be overwhelming, and we are consuming a lot of information, and we are in a world where there's lots of information coming our way, and we can often lose sight of what we're trying to do. My advice to those leaders and comms leaders who are trying to make impact in their organization is to try and understand what is important for your industry and for your organization, and what is keeping your leaders distracting and up at night, and focusing on those key elements. I think there'll be, and the world I'm in, where I talk about inclusion quite a lot, is that people try and do a lot for everyone, and it ends up being nothing for no one. So you have to be quite specific. You have to be quite clear on your objectives. You have to look outside as well as inside, but aligning it to the corporate strategy of that organization and the importance of what is going on in your leaders' minds, so you can help advise and guide and give them the professional advice that they are expecting from their communications leaders. I think there's too much distraction right now for a lot of us. We're being distracted by social media, we've been distracted by world events, we've been distracted by lots of things going on. We need to form a habit and a way of working where we can decipher the information that we need to be able to do our jobs well. And the comms folks that I work with on a frequent basis, the biggest criticism and feedback is, I'm just tired and I'm overwhelmed. And in order to address that, you need to go back to what is it that your organisation is trying to achieve, and work from that point, and understand that you won't be able to do everything, but you need to do the things that are important to ensure that your organisation survives and also thrives during what is going to be, as Stephen said, quite a turbulent time. The economy isn't brilliant, and we are expected to do more with less. I have a slight issue with that. I think we need to get better at putting no's and boundaries in place. We need to be realistic with the resources and the budgets that we have available, and we need to be able to stand up against unreasonable requests when people are asking us to do things when we don't have the resources or the budgets in place. So it's not about doing more with less. It's about understanding what we can do better with less, and not falling into that trap of doing everything just because the leader asked us to do. So we need to build confidence in our ability as well, so we can say no effectively.
Some really useful points there. Dan, did you want to pick up in particular about whereas comms professionals, you get that kind of the leader or whoever it is, that senior person in the organisation asking you to do things, and how you manage that in a useful way?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's a really good point. I think, Advita. I think one of the best ways to have an argument, stroke discussion, stroke advise with someone is having data in front of you. One thing I'm doing a lot more of our social media reviews and communications reviews to fundamentally look at what the audience is, look at where that audience is now, look at what channels you're using at the minute, and so there's invariably a lot of change from that. You know, lots of organisations have been using social media for a while. You know, I've got Twitter and I've got Facebook and maybe you've got Instagram. Are they still relevant in 2024? Are those the channels to be using? Maybe it's other stuff. What other tools are needed to be an effective communications team or as an organisation in 2024? And I think probably the best way to that is just take a breather, take 3 paces back and look at the big picture. Come back with some numbers and a report and some recommendations, which invariably is going to be, we're going to be doing less of that. We're going to be doing more of this. Because the danger always historically, certainly in local government, is we'll just get another pizza box and we'll put it on top of the big pile of stuff. We're now doing 9 things as opposed to 5 things. And it's just like, well, what the hell? If you're able to better construct the argument as to we're not doing 9 things because we're not going to do them effectively. And by the way, our audience isn't there anymore. It's moved away. So that's the reason why we're doing that. If you're doing that, it's a big level and you get the laminated card signed by the chief executive and the senior leadership team, whoever they are. Okay, because most organisations, if you approach this from a, well, we make data decisions. We're led by data, aren't we? You know, we make good decisions. But absolutely, Dan. Of course we do. Okay, so here is that from our perspective. The data would say we stop using this and this. We do less of that, but carry on. Or we do those couple of things over there. I think you're better able to survive 2024. And also, I think you'd be a bit more motivated because there's nothing worse than sitting there at 7:30 at night doing something to tick a box. And you know it's not working, but you're just keeping a middle manager happy because of all the crap they can throw your way. So taking the pause, taking a step back, looking at your audiences, looking at what they're actually using in 2024, and then designing a bit of a path forward, which entitle you to say, at Reese's point, saying no, saying no. The data, that's the reason why we're doing it. Because I think often when you point to the data, it kind of takes the sting out of things. You know, it's not you're 20 years doing that, and you've got loads of epaulets, and you're telling me I've been here for 5 years. Okay, well, let's both of us look at the data. Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's not that. It's this thing over here. So that would be my take on that. I think, Dominic.
I think that's a really good point, Dan, and it's that kind of, as all of you have said, it's that basic communications. It's kind of having your campaign plans. It's kind of outlining your vision, communicating that vision, being very specific about what you're going to do, what you're going to add value on, and what you're not going to add value on. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that sometimes we can forget. It's like we try and do everything and react to everything. Absolutely. It's actually what gets that cut through, and data is so important. You know, demonstrating kind of what are your objectives, how are you going to shift it, all that kind of thing. So I'm just going to bring Stephen in here. So I think another common theme that is coming out of what everyone's been talking about is kind of the tools that we need. So it's that point about that everyone's been talking about, that kind of, some comms teams, there's too much. So it's what do we use to kind of I suppose be better this year. And I'm thinking particularly around AI and stuff like that. So I suppose in the round, how can we kind of keep up with what's going on, and particularly what you think about kind of AI around the challenges and the risks.
Okay, sure. So AI is if you like, it exploded onto the market from a communication perspective, at least, with the launch of OpenAI in November 2022. In fact, the technologies have existed within communication practice for at least 5 years before then. The CIPRs are the panel focused on this since that day, now run by a guy called Andrew Bruce Smith. What happened then has happened with the launch of social media platforms 10 years before, is that suddenly anyone with a web browser was able to access these very, very powerful technologies, and they became completely democratized. Now, with that comes a whole load of risk issues. So I have a slide in any session that I run on AI tools, and it's right up front in the book, which is, do not cut and paste confidential data into any of these tools without understanding their data management and privacy policies. Because none of these tools yet are enterprise ready unless you're buying commercial versions of them. So that's the first thing. Proceed with absolute caution. Secondly, these tools have been shown. If we're talking about the class of tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and so forth, they have been shown to help generate with the generation of content. There's a huge discussion and a load of energy in our industry around generative AI, and the notion that these tools will, there's some sort of panacea for the generation of content. Now, they will help you undoubtedly generate content. That content at the moment is generally low value. So, it's okay for social media posts, but I wouldn't want to use it for anything more than that. What it is useful for is as an assistant in helping you create the first draft of anything, in helping you get past that blank page problem. You have to, again, apply a degree of caution because, these are predictive models. They're not based on fact. They generate content by predicting the words that you want to see and the phrases that you want to see. So, you absolutely need a layer of fact checking on top of them. So, that's the first thing. Investigated those generative tools, and there's a whole class that look really interesting from both a creativity and a content generation perspective, with the caveats that I've suggested. Perhaps more interesting, and where we haven't even really started to scratch the surface of this, because of the focus on generative AI and the ability seemingly for machines to create content as if by magic. Actually, the more interesting applications, I think, are reductive. So where you have this class of tools are able to take large data sets, so large amounts of text or any form of data, and make sense of it. Again, data management, conscious of data management policies. You can use these class of tools to take any piece of content, long form content, from a report to a book to a research paper, and ask it to extract the key arguments, the key methods, create crib notes for you. And they're incredibly powerful in getting to grips with a complex situation very, very quickly. And they can save days of work in doing that. So that's where I'd encourage people to also look, and then the applications and use cases that develop from that are things like red teaming, crisis management, and issues planning. So understanding, interrogating documents and multiple document data sets using the latest versions of these tools to create your own GPT models, where you can interrogate them for risk issues or opportunities equally.
Thank you. I'm just unmuting myself. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. One of the points that is really interesting. I think when you're looking at AI and where you start with AI, it's still those kind of basics that AI won't solve all the problems. It's very much thinking about what is the problem we want to solve, and then using the right tools for that. But I think it's that, yeah. It's an ever-changing world. Dan, did you just want to come in on social media at all, and where you see that going over the next year? You're on mute, Dan.
That's amazing. How did you do that? I couldn't even put it in touch the thing. Thank you, Dominic. Just with social media, I think a continuation of some existing trends. So moving away from the big town hall, I like a guitar, what do you mean you like a guitar, you're an idiot, to more to safer spaces where people are happy chatting. So LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, being WhatsApp channels, if there's something to have a look at. WhatsApp channels as a means of using a tool which is used by 60% or more of every demographic from 18 to plus 65, using WhatsApp channels or tools around it to try and communicate. I think that is very much a trend which will be evolving and changing. Real Madrid use it really well. So you don't have to like football just to see what kind of content that they're using. Broader trend as well, away from links. There was some data that Facebook put out, which was the reach of content from a Facebook page with a link was reaching 3.7%. It's now reaching 0.0%, which would kind of suggest having a link and just waiting for people to go to the website. It's not something that's particularly profitable. There's ways around that, but just doing the same tactics that we all did in 2012 or 2016 or even more recently needs rethinking. I think as well, noise and dealing with comment, criticism and abuse, the ability to have a set of social media house rules to say, here's what we'll put up with, here's what we won't. That was relevant last year, more relevant this year as people get more cross, particularly, which was a point that Stephen mentioned, just about the public sector. How do you communicate the fact that your council's gone bankrupt and you're not going to be doing half the stuff you did previously? What are people going to say to that? Well, they're going to be really angry. Okay, so how do you support staff? How do you support staff in a range of organisations with people being, crosser online and more freer to hurl abuse at people? Also, lastly, just away from Twitter, I don't think Twitter's going to do the whole falling over thing, but it's just increasingly less relevant. It'd be interesting to see. And you don't want it to happen clearly, but the next big major incident, where people go to, how they find the information out, because they will just go off and do it. So I couldn't predict what that's going to be, but it'll be interesting to see. Clearly, you don't want it to happen, but flooding, it was all in Facebook groups as opposed to Twitter.
Thank you, Dan. That's really interesting. And I was just going to turn to Advita now, and I think it was picking up on some of the points you've both been talking about, Dan and Stephen, just about the kind of ever-changing world and the kind of new technology and what's happening in the pace of change. And I suppose that contrasts with a point you made, Advita, that actually one of the things that is going to be really, really important is still the power of human storytelling. It'd be really interesting just to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think we need to still remember that the people that we're working with are human beings, and they go through a range of emotions and different feelings, and they're allowed to have an opinion. They're allowed to express their worries and their anxiousness, and we need to be able to decipher that in the right way. I think it's not easy, that's the wrong word actually, but I think it is easy to get carried away with trends, and it's easier to kind of fall into this, I need to know more about AI, I need to do more about that. But I would always say, with a bit of a balance with, these are still human beings we're communicating with, and what does that mean, and what type of stories do we need to communicate with? As Dan made a really valid point earlier about data sets and using data to form our narrative and discussions and debates that we may have with leaders. The same applies when we're looking at the demographics of the people that we're communicating with. Who are these individuals? What do they need? What are they going through right now? Stephen mentioned about Israel and Hamas and Ukraine and Russia. Do we have colleagues from those regions who are struggling right now? And how do we make sure that they feel safe and connected with what's going on in the workplace? And we're providing the right level of support through the comms angle, but also through our leaders, where we might be advising and guiding them. And that's where the humanness comes out a little bit. A lot of people worry a lot, and rightly so, around the political stance about some of these conversations that are going on. But when you take away the political side and look at humanness of what are we trying to achieve here, and what do we need to do to make sure that our colleagues feel safe and feel supported so they can do the work that we have hired them to do, we play a part to an extent as comms professionals to hear and listen and be able to articulate that to our leadership team if we feel that they're going off on a different path. And that's where the humanness come in, and we should bring in that EQ where it may be missing in storytelling, in advice giving, in making sure that we're listening, more importantly, because I think we've forgotten to listen, to be honest. We're so busy reading so much information and trying to catch up and keep up. And it goes back to my previous point about we can't do everything. You know, we have to edit our choices, and we need to make decisions based on the needs of our organization and the capacity and the capability that we have available around us. And that's where we will keep in touch with the humanness of who we are and what we do and the stories that we tell.
No, it's really powerful. Thank you. And I think just on that note, if you haven't read it, there's a book, Stolen Focus, which is it's really worth reading and covers many of the points that Advita's talking about, that we're kind of distracted in this kind of this post-truth era with kind of so many things bombarding us, from emails to social media notifications and all that kind of thing, and just thinking about what it is that we can do to tackle those distractions. And some of the things are societal and some are potentially individual, but really interesting debate. And I'm just going to move into some questions from the chat. So we've got one for Stephen. So do you anticipate that a change in government will see a change in central government's comms approach, and could we not end up doing more of the same?
I'm not close enough to GCS to be able to comment on whether the impact of the change in government would the impact of the change in government on the civil service would have. Sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna just have a look through some of the more questions in the chat. Lots of positive comments about everything that everyone's saying. So we've got a question here about if you want to start changing perceptions of comms regarding the strategic or operational importance. Perhaps we need to start inviting prominent CEOs and leaders into meetings and educating them to the challenges we face and use them to champion that. Who would like to take that one?
I think that's a really good point, but I would say you need to address, again, going back to my previous point about what is important to your leaders, because they will listen to what you have to say as long as you're aligning it to what they are worried about in terms of business objectives. I think they don't, in my experience, you know, and this is my opinion only in the work that I've done, is that business leaders, it's not that they don't care about communications, but what they are interested in is how can communications help them deliver the business objectives. And if you can get them to listen to some of the challenges that you're facing by tagging it to the business objectives, then they'll listen. I've never had an experience with a CEO or a C-suite member who hasn't heard me when I've spoken about comms, but I've associated it to the business strategies and the corporate strategies that they've got in place. So I think just on that point, I don't think businesses don't care about comms. I think they care about comms if we can demonstrate the impact it can have on their business challenges. And that's what we need to be aware of as communication professionals. They're not necessarily interested in how many newsletters you're sending out or how much budget you might need for X, Y, and Z. They want to know, how is your work contributing to the value of this organization and helping us deliver our business objectives? And that's when Stephen's point out, the professionalism and the business mindedness of what we do.
Stephen, I saw you nodding on that point. Did you want to come in at all?
Well, just that, you know, this isn't an issue we are going to solve this year. You know, if you look back, public relations, and, you know, I'm sorry, I'm very, very dull on this because I've spent 3 years reading around this topic and driven myself almost insane, literally, related to it, because, you know, we are the practice that we are the profession that doesn't ever seem to learn. You know, post-war, we were operating properly as a management discipline in helping with the recovery and the rebuilding of the nation and public services, and, you know, the NHS emerged as part of that, and so forth. But then something went wrong in the, you know, industrialized era, where, you know, we reverted to this tactical function, or the majority of practice reverted to this tactical function, and you know, we lost sight of the bigger opportunity. And you know, I really struggle to understand why every single CIPR State of the Profession report, you know, going back 5 or 10 years, cites, you know, the representation of public relations and board within management as one of the prominent era. Yet here we are, we're having this same conversation, you know, and I'm writing a PhD about it. You know, the answers are all there out in front of us, and you know, I outlined some of them relating to professionalism, as other management disciplines recognise professionalism, and measurement and planning, as Advita has said, aligned with, you know, the organisational objectives. But we seem to get, you know, repeatedly down in the detail and the weeds all the time, and just lose sight of it.
Yeah, I think that's something that keeps coming up in this discussion, that I think some of the time it's just focusing on too many things, and actually we just need to have that relentless focus on, as an organisation, what is it we want to achieve, what do we want to kind of focus on. One of the questions I'm going to turn to Dan was in the chat: do we need a new skill set as communicators?
Oh, that's unfair, Dominic. Just throwing that. I mean, probably not. Yes, it's probably some new skills, but I'd probably say, I remember trying to list once about 18 months ago all the skills you probably need for communications, and realizing that actually no one single person could have all those things, but across a team you could probably cover those off. There's going to be some that are going to be really core to everyone in 2024. Other things you may need to just have someone on the team to devote time to something, which I think probably is how AI may well be evolving. It's going to be someone in a team going, do you know what, that we should do more of this, dragging everyone else along. I think. Sorry
to put you on the spot. I thought that's a really good answer. Right. Stephen, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just jump in? Again, you know, I've had the luxury of spending 3 years reading all the literature in this area related to management and public relations. There's 2 really, really brilliant pieces of work been done related to competency frameworks of the public relations skill as it relates to management. One was done by someone we might all know, Professor Anne Gregory, the University of Leeds, sorry, the University of Huddersfield, formerly at Leeds Beckett, who, under the auspices of the Global Alliance, ran a 5-year project looking at competency within public relations, and, you know, identified 11 areas of skill and 52, you know, different individual skills. You know, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We are obsessed with our industry, within our industry, about shiny new toys and reinventing the wheel. And I'd urge people, go and start and look at that piece of work, because it's a really excellent piece of work, you know, and the CIPR falls under it. Because you know, as part of the Global Alliance. The other piece of work that, you know, that's been done, really great piece of work, 15-year study, sorry, by a number of universities across Europe, you know, involving more than 20,000 practitioners, looked at the conditions for excellence within public relations at an organizational level, a team level, and an individual level. You know, really well established as strong theory, but almost universally ignored, unfortunately, by practice. But, you know, sets out the conditions for what good should look like within an organization, within a team, and practitioner level. And, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Much of this work has been done. It's just not been made it through into practice for some reason.
I was just going to say, I'm certainly guilty myself of shiny new things. So that's something that it's probably one of my New Year's resolutions, not to have it more as many shiny new things as I have had previously. I'm just going to pick up something in the chat for Advita. I think we're nearly out of time. But what are your thoughts on the polarisation of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And companies worried by not saying the wrong thing, particularly with politics in the UK and the US elections?
I think polarisation of DEI has always existed, Dom, and I think it was Frank that asked that question. It's always been there. I think it's heightened now because people are asking more curious questions and are holding leaders accountable. People are frightened. There's lots of fear around it, and the fear exists because they're not educated in that space. So people are worried about saying the wrong thing and being called out and cancelled. My advice to comms leaders and comms professionals or advising leaders is to do your homework. Do listen to what your colleagues are telling you. What do they need from you? Is it relevant for you to get involved in some of the conversations taking place? How does it add value? Is it about reassuring your colleagues that you are creating those spaces for them to thrive? Yes, then you need to communicate in a human way, as we've spoken about. You don't need to get so worked up, I would say, about saying the right thing in terms of political stance, but definitely about saying the thing that your colleagues need from you as a leader. And comms need to educate themselves about what that is and what that looks like. But polarization of DEI has always existed, and it'll keep on getting heightened as time goes on because people are scared. People don't like change at all. Like that's a proven fact. And when people are seeing change happen and people are stepping up and feeling more confident about it, you're going to get questioned about it. So it's always existed. Do your homework, seek out research, read my book, a little bit of promotion there. We've shared some top tips and techniques and advice in there for you to help you along the way if you are struggling. But you don't need to be experts in that space. You just have to take in board what people are telling you, what you're hearing, and then advising and guiding as comms would do in the right way.
So yeah, just on that point, I am going to say, so I will send around details of Advita's book, which is a bit difficult to see with my blur on. Really useful and important read, and Stephen's book as well on AI and the tools that we can all be using. And do read Dan's blog on the predictions for 2024. So we're nearly out of time, so I'm just going to ask each panelist very quickly for any final thoughts on the year ahead. Anything we haven't covered, any final thoughts you would like to share? Who would like to kick off? Dan, did you want to kick off?
Yeah, just to chip in, just reflecting as I was listening, like, take away some of the detail, but broadly, many of the general points made today could have been made 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So if that's reassuring, that's probably quite reassuring in some ways. And do you know what? We got through 2016, didn't we? And 2017, 2010. So we're going to get together as a team. We'll get through 2024 as well.
Yeah, so something my history teacher taught me back in when I was doing my degree quite a long time ago now, that nothing really changes, and that all the kind of lessons of a history is just everything repeats itself over and over again. Stephen, did you want to share any final thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, there was just picking out of the thread. There's an interesting dialogue about this growing discourse around the role of listening, and Advita's mentioned this within corporate comms, and Kevin Rupp's written a new book about this recently. Jim McNamara just published a second edition of his book. The importance of the function within as part of corporate communication. It's really interesting. There's a lot of dialogue around that at the moment. I guess AI, the question I always ask is, where do I start with AI? And I'd urge anyone, and I put it in the thread here, start with get yourself an ChatGPT account or a Claude account, so you've got access to a large language model. I would pay for it so that you work operating under secure data management policies, and then sit with it on your desk open when you're doing your day-to-day work, and you'll be surprised. You'll soon find it will become your new Google. You'll soon find ways to use it and incorporate it within your your day-to-day tasks. So that's my number one tip. If you want to get ahead with AI, just do it.
Sorry, did you say do use the paid for version of ChatGPT?
Yeah,
or don't?
Absolutely use the paid for version. Okay,
great, thank you. Advita, any final thoughts?
I think for me, it's just typically as Dan, Dan has said, this is none of this is new. This has been repetition for a long time. I've been in the industry 25 years. Big thing is just be kind to yourselves and to others, and be patient. And I think that's really important for us to remember, that we're all going through it together. We need, this is an incredible community. There's been 150 of you today coming along. Use each other, support each other, and just be kind to yourselves. There's a lot going on. Make sure you take that time to reflect, to step away, try and avoid burnout, and look after your well-being and mental health, because that's one thing that comms professionals, we look after everybody else's. We make sure that everyone else is doing okay. We help our leaders and guide them and all that stuff, but we sometimes forget ourselves. So my final thought is just be kind, take your time, be patient, and being 1% better than what you were yesterday is better than nothing. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and it's something we can so easily lose sight of, that being kind to each other. And it's not difficult. It's something we should all be able to do. So just want to say thank you so much to our panel. There's so many questions that we could have asked, but we unfortunately only had an hour. So I'll share all the reading that's come out of today. So do take time to read Advita and Stephen's books and everything that Dan is saying on 2024. Follow them on social media. Such an inspiration, certainly for me over the years. Hope you've enjoyed today. The next event's going to be running award-winning behaviour change campaigns. So I'll send the details around. So thank you everyone for coming. And see you soon.
Thanks everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dominic. Thanks all.
Take care.
Cheerio.
Bye now.